And good morning, fantasy football fans. Y'all ready to drink some coffee, talk some football? Well, we're excited. We're doing a double header that we did with our guest, Ben. He is part of the 14P pod, right?
Yes, sir. That's
Yeah,
right.
I was on there last night with him and his cohort Jay, and we're going to kind of have a continuation this morning of a great IDP rookie veteran talk, whatever general conversation. And you all probably already know if you've joined us before of Justin Varnes. Welcome to the show, guys. Mr. Varnes is a permanent guest host. He can show up whenever he wants because he's a very smart IDP man. All right, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to, Justin, and then Ben will hit you up.
Cool.
Well, I've been doing IDP for several years. I work with a website called fantasypoints.com, and we've been doing a lot of draft prep over the last couple of months. Tons of rookies to look at. Trying to figure out landing spots, and just a lot of prep this summer. Also, just doing some reverse analysis, looking back, evaluation on some of the analytics and tools that I used over the last season. Man, last season was tough, Gary.
It was.
Just in terms of everything happening with COVID and trying to figure out without training camp how slowly some of last year's rookies. We knew going into last year that these rookie IDPs were going to have the toughest road ever to get themselves onto the football field, just because what head coach is going to just throw a rookie into an important lineup, without training camp and all of that. So I'm really hoping we get back to some semblance of regularity for the preseason and off season. That way we can feel a lot more comfortable in our analysis. But that's about it. Just looking at rookies and trying to prepare for the draft.
Well, I'm excited to have you back on here, Justin. There's a lot of IDP stuck in that head of yours, and I appreciate you sharing it with everybody. So Ben, I was kind of looking things over a little bit more and stuff. So you guys have been potting, but you just kind of started your account on Twitter like the November of last year or something. You got a nice little following there. It looks like you're really circulating. I want to congratulate you. There are a lot of newer pods, they struggle and it goes through, but apparently connections, friends, and good content is what can help you out on at least the Twitter universe. And, I just want you to tell us a little bit about what you guys have been up to, you and Jay as your partner, and then just kind of roll with what you want to maybe discuss.
Yeah, so the 14P, 14 personnel is what it stands for. So it was actually started by a couple of our friends, Marco and Justin. And so they basically started the site and they have their own pod on there as well. So we kind of utilized their handle. So I won't take the credit for how that's been built up because it's they built it up. They started it back during the season. But Jay and I jumped on. We just did episode 10 with you last night, Gary. That was our 10th episode. We go every Thursday night. We're a dynasty show, so we've only been on for 2.5 months now. But it definitely have thankful for all the connections we've got because of where we've been able to get it to over the last 10 weeks, and we've been super lucky to have some awesome guests like yourself. Over the last month, we've really done some, like Justin was saying, we've actually been focusing on the draft stuff too. We're far from scouts and experts and things like that, but we've had some folks that are, at least that we would consider in the industry, and really brought them on to talk about the rookie class. We kind of went position by position, quarterback, running back, and then the pass catchers. And then last night we had you for the defensive side of the ball. So it was we thought it was a cool approach to dynasty because there's a lot of fantasy folks in the community and we love everybody that's in it, but it was just it was an opportunity to say, okay, rather than looking at it from a purely fantasy perspective, let's talk to some of these guys that have been studying these college kids for, years or months now and really kind of get their thoughts on what that looks like. So that's kind of where our focus has been. Now we're getting obviously more into like, okay, we're ready for the draft. It's 2 weeks from yesterday. Like, let's get some landing spots and figure out like what really matters at this point.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, cool. And I apologize before you maybe move on with the topic. I want to mention, folks, because I did last. Roxanne, which is normally on the show, she had a COVID second shot backlash, so she's not been feeling well this week. She actually was not here Tuesday, and I totally just kept running through and dropped the ball. I had to mention it afterwards, but I want to mention she is going to be on here in a little while, maybe another 10 or 15 minutes, and I just want to mention that because I didn't last time, and that's an ass hat move of mine. So I apologize, Roxanne. So, but just got rolling and totally forgot about it. I also want to mention, please, real quick, if you could run over to YouTube, you can find us at Gridiron Ratings Fantasy Football. Hit subscribe for us. Of course, we're on Periscope or Twitter, the old Periscope, and at Getting Defensive. Give us a follow. And now I'm going to stop and I'm going to turn it over to you, Ben.
No, all good. So the only other thing I wanted to mention, and I forgot to mention this last night too, and that's my fault.
Right.
Special project I've been working on. If you follow me on Twitter handles there is it's called Brighter Skies, and it's a charity best ball league that we're running this off season. It's going to be our first one, but we're basically doing donations to a charity, Cyber Smile, and your donation basically gets you like into our raffle to draw to be in the league. And then we're going to be doing an all-day podathon during the draft, kind of like ESPN and the NFL Network do during the NFL draft. We're going to have a bunch of fantasy folks on, just like live streaming like we're doing, talking about this best ball draft as it's going on. But the whole idea behind it is basically to raise awareness behind cyberbullying and how just devastating it can be. So
nice. Yeah.
Brighter Skies, that's the shirt I'm wearing. So
Sweet. Yeah. But definitely make sure that one way or the other, tag me in it, or just I'll be watching for it. I want to make sure I help promote that for you.
Appreciate that.
That's a great cause. That's a great
Thank
cause.
You for that. So so that's all I've got. So I won't talk anymore.
All right. Well, I think you brought up. Let me. How about I start off then? I'm a little bit running around here, but how about this Aaron Donald news? I've got some people reaching out. They're concerned about IDP. They're concerned about, what's happening to this 29-year-old because, he's a high commodity. He's a high draft pick in redraft or dynasty, realistically. I know he's a little long in the tooth, but Ben, we'll start with you real quick. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have anything? I mean, what have you heard? Anything in particular?
Yeah, I mean, and my thoughts from an IDP perspective are, and we talked about this last night. I'm basically a dynasty or a IDP novice, and so this is my first year really jumping into it. But just like from a pure football standpoint, it's at this point we know he's been accused of whatever happened, a bar fight, whatever it was. So obviously we have to see more details come out. My concern at this point is like, what's the end result, right? Like, is he going to be suspended? How many games does he miss? And those are the kind of things that, I'm starting to look at, especially if I have him on my roster as an IDP, or if I'm doing a startup draft or something like that. Just kind of like, where do you value him now? Knowing, like you said, he's 29 at this point. He's probably, not probably, but he may miss some games this season. So that's kind of where, like, do you drop him in your rankings? Like, I guess, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, for me, until I try to balance whether or not, how much of a commodity is this player, how valuable is it to have him versus, because once you get to this elite tier of players, their positional value really starts to overshadow everyone below them. There's a handful of players in each position. It'd be like a Devontae Adams or not last year's Michael Thomas, something like that. Some or obviously, a Travis Kelce from a tight end. I try to think about his positional value. So if you look over at the offensive side, if something like this happened to Travis Kelce, right, you would think to yourself, well, there aren't many Travis Kelces, right? It's one thing if it was like maybe like a Zach Ertz or some other tight end. It's like, oh no, this is a good player, and there could be some good things left in him, but he's starting to get a little bit old. I would more easily drop someone like a middle tier defensive player, but a defensive lineman in particular. But elite defensive linemen are very hard to come by these days. One of the things that's happened in the NFL over the last 5 years is we're seeing far more rotational players on the defensive line. They're just, now every position is almost 2 and 3 deep, which means a player's snap count, they're starting to plummet. We're seeing very few IDPs on the defensive line play 90 plus, 90% snap shares. Aaron Donald is one of those players. So for me, I'm going to hang on to Aaron Donald longer in this process until I know for sure he's going to be suspended, because to me, I can if I lose Aaron Donald, then I have to go out and get a second tier defensive lineman. Well, there are a lot more second and third tier defensive linemen out there.
Hell of a lot more.
To grab from the pool than there is the unicorn that is Aaron Donald. So for me, because of his positional value, I'm going to ride out. If I've got Aaron Donald, I'm going to ride that out as long as I can, because at this stage, he's been accused. Obviously, I'm no legal expert, but just in looking at cases that, other players in the past who've gotten into bar fights, right? As a matter of fact, didn't Zach Ertz? No, not.
There was,
right.
It was Goddard, Dallas Goddard, I think. Over this offseason.
Yeah, his tight end teammate got into a bar fight, sucker punched some guy, whatever. So, the history of bar fights and that sort of stuff looks a little, looks generally more favorable that something gets worked out. And obviously, we don't know what will come out of this, but in general, the charges seem to be, or the accusations seem to be more like a straight up bar fight, which often come with misdemeanor as opposed to felony charges. So if he is suspended or punished somehow, I also don't think it's going to be some, 10-game suspension or 2-year suspension. That's not likely. So maybe he gets suspended for a game or two. To me, that's not worth losing the elite value that Aaron Donald has. What do you think, Gary?
Well, that's exactly basically what it boiled down to me. First, I want to know what the hell he was doing at a bar at 3:00 in Pittsburgh, 3 a.m. And allegedly it was that Donald got bumped by this guy, so he laid him out. I mean, come on. Yeah, what are you doing? I mean, Aaron Donald's, he's a great guy. He's a great character. He's great for the NFL. But come on, so I'm really questioning this whole thing. I'm right there with Justin. This is not like he went out and assaulted a woman. It's not like he went out and robbed somebody. He is probably, depending how this works out, he could possibly be suspended for, up to 3 games, maybe. He doesn't lose any value. And I know from a dynasty aspect, he's 29 years old. But he is definitely one of those players that has not shown any losing of a step or anything like that. So he still has, in my mind, I'm looking at him in a dynasty league. I want him for the next 3 years. I want him until he turns about 32, and then we'll reevaluate. So realistically, I'm sitting here right now, and I'm in IDP incentive. I'm sitting on the first round pick, and the first thing I thought of is, okay, it's a lottery ticket, but man, there's some nice wide receivers. I'm wondering if the Aaron Donald's for sale, because I need defensive tackle help. And what could I get with Aaron Donald for that first? I literally thought about taking the advantage. This might be a good chance for people in leagues to go out, throw a third, throw a second, see if anything bites, even if they come back with a little bit more. I mean, you're still looking at arguably top 3 defensive lineman in the NFL, and he's not going nowhere. I don't see any problem. I wouldn't freak out just yet. All of this could be brushed under the rug. Sure, the NFL, even if it was brushed under the rug and he pays this dude off just to keep his mouth shut and make it all go away, whatever it is, the NFL is still going to go, well, we got to investigate, maybe he misses one game, but yeah, I don't see it. We may not see this actually unfold until next year.
Right.
There are appeals. There's all this stuff that he could do. It probably depends. They'll have to evaluate. Okay, do we have a shot to make the playoffs this year? Donald have to look at it. Hey, look, are we really contenders this year? Do I appeal this and drag it out, or do I wait until next year? There's a lot of decisions to be made. But the main thing is, don't freak out, people. Don't freak out. He's still one of the best guys to own when it comes to defensive linemen.
And Gary, I think that's great strategy. Now, before things start to get settled, before something gets settled out of court, before a lot of the info comes out, the risk reward is so much in the reward favor that now is a great time to reach out to your Aaron Donald owner in your league. I would try to do some sort of package so it's a little bit obscured that you're just straight up trying to steal Aaron Donald from them.
Right.
That's a good point.
Right.
But if you can package a draft pick and maybe an offensive player and do some sort of thing where Aaron Donald's part of the package so that they think like, yeah, you know what? Actually, now might be a good time to get rid of Aaron Donald. Now is the time versus waiting. Or I'll also say a second good time is if you hear that he might get suspended, that's the next best time to get it because, like we're saying, history does not show that this kind of accusation turns into a 6 or 8 game suspension.
It's his first time. It's his first. Been the face of the NFL forever. Roger Goodell is not going to go in there and lower the boom on him.
Absolutely.
Not if he doesn't have to.
Right.
I think that's important to remember too, because it's like you said, it's like not to compare legal situations, but the NFL has shown us like these types of things, like you said, like they don't like really punish you a ton for something like this, especially if it just like turns out it was just like he wasn't out like seeking this guy. He didn't go out like and just push it, whatever. He probably I mean, Aaron Donald's a big dude. Like he probably hit this guy maybe once or whatever. So
right.
Something like that.
I want to clarify to everybody that I was talking about. This is a 16-team league that I was talking about that I traded up and I got the first, and it's crossed my mind to offer on Aaron Donald. Now, I want everybody to understand, I do realize that this class is really loaded down with some really top quality wide receivers. I would probably, if I even thought about it, and it's basically because I am stacked in my league. The way that this draft went, I am stacked at wide receiver. I think I'm looking for it now. I'll make sure that I quote myself right. But I think I'm sitting on Hopkins. Now, this is a 16-team league, so I'm sitting on Aguilar, Diggs, Evans, Hopkins, Cubb, Lazard, and Tre'Quan Smith. So I don't necessarily need to go swinging for the fence. So don't necessarily think that I'm first-round picks. I don't value them like everybody else. So if I could get an Aaron Donald when I'm sitting on defensive tackles, James Robinson Harrison and Grover Stewart, that is my starting defensive tackles. Yeah, Aaron Donald is a first-round pick for me. But I'll probably ask for the guy's second or something at the same time. We'll see. But I just wanted to be clear. I'm not your normal draft person. So, I'll overpay to get Aaron Donald if I do it. I just wanted to clear that up. And Ben, you were bringing up something about Clowney.
Yeah, so we were talking pre-show a little bit, and obviously that's probably the most recent, like outside of NFL draft talk, like the most recent news that's really broke. That Clowney's a big name at this point, still only getting 1-year contracts, it seems like, and I think that I guess from my like novice perspective from an IDP, Clowney feels like more of a name than anything. I do like the situation in Cleveland on the opposite side of Myles Garrett. I think that that's a good opportunity for him. I know that they've added some other pieces on defense this offseason as well. Was it Josh Johnson, the safety, coming over from the Rams, and they've added some few other pieces. So I like the situation for him. I think it's going to free him up to probably just do what he does best. But I mean, we've seen Clowney, like his injury history, his production hasn't quite been the same. So just from a pure like novice standpoint, I'm just kind of curious where you guys value him now that he's in Cleveland.
Gary, you want to start?
Hey, mine is short and sweet. It's not tack. It's not tack. Clooney is a stud. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, he's a little older in the tooth. He's not quite the dude that we used to see a few years ago. But when you put him on that line, opposite of Miles Garrett, is nothing but an improvement.
Yeah.
And he should, by default, just knowing what Oliver did in that position last year, he should, by default, be reaching that DL2, DE2 top tier part of that. Even probably with a few games, because who do you run? Which side do you run to, Clooney or Garrett? You
Right.
know, so he's going to get some production just by an extra opportunity, in my point. I love the signing. I love what Cleveland has done with that defense. It's
Absolutely.
really coming together.
Yeah, I think it's a very smart signing for Cleveland because you know, their interior line, Sheldon Richardson, et cetera, like they were one piece away from having just, you know, this massively deep line too. Also, Porter Gustin is an underrated player. I think I think what's happening here is that this is going to be a great move for the Cleveland Browns. I don't think it's a great move for, well, it actually will be an upgrade for Clowney because Clowney will have, you know, there'll be so much attention paid down that line that Clowney will see, probably he'll be in his most advantageous arena in a while to get to the quarterback. The thing is, Clowney has, I don't think he's played a full season. I can't even remember. I might not even been born by the last time we played a full season.
Yeah.
So, you know, and obviously, my guess is because they are so deep, they are going to keep Clowney off the field a bit, keep him rested, try to preserve that if they really think that they've got playoff potential there.
Yeah.
Also, I think, you know, the perception of Clowney is that he is somebody who's going to put up tons of sacks, but he's actually a far better run defender than he is sack. He rarely hits double-digit sacks. Matter of fact, in his career, he's never done it. He had 9 sacks in 2018. That was or 9.5 in 2017. That was his peak. He's never crossed the double-digit sack category. So I think he's going to have more value than he had last year. There's obviously a reason he keeps bouncing around teams. There's a reason that for the second offseason in a row, his status has dragged on because he keeps asking for double-digit sack money, and no team wants to pay him for that. So I think Cleveland. My guess is that he's going to be. I'm with Gary. I think he's going to be a solid DL2. Just make sure that you don't see the name Jadeveon Clowney and think, cool, I'm going to get 12 to 15 sacks out of this guy because he's, you know, he will do well. He just won't do as well as some may think. And you have to assume he's going to play somewhere between 12 to 14 games when you put him on your roster. If you expect that, you won't be disappointed. You'll be prepared for it, and maybe he plays a full season. So it's a great shot for him. But you know, again, I see this doing well for his tackle numbers. Maybe not so much as a double-digit sack guy.
Totally agree, Justin. I could picture upper 40s combined tackles, low 50s, possibly half a dozen sacks. That's how I would look at it.
That's right on the money. That's where I've got him too, Gary.
All right, sweet.
Well, I think you made a good point just before we move on too, is just like his snap percentage too, because I mean he doesn't play nearly as many snaps as like you think a guy like that does. So I kind of like what it does for the rest of that defense almost more than I like just from like a fantasy standpoint than what it does for Clowney, because like you said, now it's going to open it up for Myles Garrett. It's going to open it up for those linebackers because he is a great run defender. So you want to run, you know, if you don't want to run against Clowney, good luck on the other side against Myles Garrett.
Yeah, right. Either way, he deserves attention from that offensive line. So he's going to occupy a couple guys.
And the last thing I want to add about it is, you know, he's bounced around teams. He's had injury history, all this sort of stuff. There's, you know, he's still just 28, you know, which isn't young in the NFL, but you know, it's not like he's 32 or something, you know. So there is upside there if you can get him on the cheap and expect him to put up solid numbers, you know. not double-digit sacks, not 70 to 80 tackles, but 40 to 50 tackles from your defensive end these days. That's solid production for your second or your third defensive lineman.
And technically, in my book, even at a defensive lineman, I still consider 28 in that prime year.
Me too.
So he might surprise us.
Yeah.
You never know. This might be where he needed to go. I didn't like him signing. What was he with?
Tennessee last year.
The Titans.
I did not like that signing to begin with, but I actually like this one with Cleveland and this defensive scheme.
Yeah, and actually, Gary, that's a great point. For those of you who are fairly new to IDP, one of the depending on your league, if your league has an edge rusher position, then the next thing I'm going to say won't matter, and we're trying to move more and more toward that. But the other issue with Clowney is that when Clowney went to Tennessee, who basically line up as 3-4, although they're fairly multiple, he could get categorized as an OLB, which means now you're trying to get linebacker production out of him. So him landing with the Browns is one more little uptick, is that he'll certainly be classified as a defensive end. And that's going to help you, navigate that. Is he going to end up being a linebacker problem, which we won't know until it gets a little closer to the season, if it were on some team like Tennessee or New England or something like that.
Right. Yep. 4-3 defensive end is a lot better than what he had going on with the 3-4 in Tennessee. So
yes, sir.
That's a lot better signing for him. For us IDP people.
Well, and I just pulled it up real quick too. He only played 38% of the snaps last year in Tennessee. That's not an average. That's a total, I think. And then the year before that, when he actually played more games, he still only saw like 56%. So he's not going to be a high snap percentage guy.
Yeah, just like Justin, you got Buckner, you got Donald, you have the Bozas, you have certain ones, but there's only so many that'll play more than 75% of the snaps a game. And those are the elite studs physically in the NFL, which usually translates into great IDPs for us. The rest of them, they'll rotate. They have to keep them fresh. They're in there. They're specializing in either run downs or passing downs, pass rush, whatever. And on average, most of the rest of the groups they're 50 to 60% in rotation, probably on average. It just depends what team it is, So when you get a hold of somebody like now Clowney might see an uptick, that we can't take that off the table. It is possible, because they've got a good starting defensive line in Cleveland, but what about depth? Do you really bring Clowney off that much, or do you see if he can hang in there and maybe get another 10% out of them? Right. But we'll see. We'll see what they're up to. Either way, that Cleveland defense with John Johnson, I love the Anthony Walker signing. With that secondary and what they've got going on, I think that they have really taken a step forward to becoming more of a playoff threat. It'd be tough if you're looking at that division. I almost want to say Cleveland's got to be the favorite in my eyes. I don't know. Am I crazy?
I think so.
They're clearly going for it, and the Clowney signing is indicative of that, because $10 million is nothing to sneeze at. And they know they're taking a gamble with Clowney. They know his injury history. They know all that stuff. They know Clowney wants more money than he's probably worth. But for them to invest that is clearly the ownership of the management. Another sign of like, hey, listen, we have this window, and we need help on the defense. And like you said, Gary, they've stacked up on defense. John Johnson's a huge signing for them. And they had a really solid defensive line last year. So upgrading Olivier Vernon up to Clowney, particularly from the run stopping perspective, is a clear sign that they're going to go for it. Also, I would not be surprised as we get closer to the end of the offseason, if some of these linebacker free agents that are out there, if one or two of those don't end up on Cleveland as well. What's the KJ Wright needs
to call them.
Yeah, right.
KJ Wright needs to call them, get that weak side. Oh man! And again, one last thing on Clowney: it's not Tack McKinley.
Right.
That was a pipe dream. That was a pipe dream, folks.
Yes.
All right. So we can move on to something else here. Anything else at the top of your head there, Ben? Or
No, I mean, that's about it. The only other thing, I think that Cleveland's been linked to a lot of these edge rushers in the draft as well. So I don't know what this does for them as far as that goes. But like you said, as far as depth goes, could still see them pushing for one of these guys maybe in a late first.
Yeah.
definitely. And they're probably in a position where, well, just like what I like to say, rookies are luxuries. So maybe they do go and get a second round pass rusher to get in that rotation or one of the top defensive linemen. Speaking of that, let's roll right over. So my overall take in this whole situation with the IDP class this year, Justin, is that they're not as good as some of these prior classes we've just had. And I was taking a wild guesstimation, and you know I'm not a big rookie guy. As a matter of fact, Justin is a guy that I reached out to just a week or so ago, just talking to him, say, guess what? My dumb ass is getting into rookies. So help, point me in a direction.
You can thank me for that.
Right. Point me out. Give me some direction. And Mr. Varnes helped me out a lot. But either way, what do you think of this class? What do you think how do you think this draft's going to go?
Well, the last 2 years, the last two drafts have been pretty deep for defensive players, and it doesn't always work out that way. But we've had, the last two classes, were heavy in defensive backs. We saw it get deep with defensive linemen as well. This year, not so much, and I think we saw this coming. So last year. We knew we should just go ahead and maybe stock up a little bit more than usual on take a few more dart throws at the rookie IDP class, partly because for a lot of these players, it will be this year. We're talking about last year's draft class. It'll be this year that will feel like their first full NFL season, right? They're going to have a training camp and all that. So because of that, because teams already feel like they've got some really good IDPs or really good defensive players in last year's NFL draft that they really haven't had a chance to work with on a regular basis yet. This is kind of their rookie year. I see that combined with a fairly thin rookie class in terms of IDP. I don't see this being one of those classes where we see 8 IDPs going in the first round, which has happened before, but I don't think it's going to be this year. I think we do have some really good players at the top, but I think finding a 4th to 7th round pick, piece of gold is going to be a lot harder this year on the IDP side. So just keep that in mind in your drafts.
All right. And when I was doing some research and everything, of course you're on the internet, and I kept seeing that Alabama cornerback Certain as the first IDP dude off the board, in the real draft. They were predicting he'd be the first defensive player off. And I'm thinking, okay, what about Parsons? And what about, and that speaks volumes for me when you look at Surtain and his description of his ability and what he was in college, and he's not a top end speed guy. He's going to need help over the top. And here he is as the first IDP predicted to come off the board in the NFL draft. So that speaks volumes right there to me too. Just thinking about it,
it's like positional scarcity in the draft because we don't really have that many NFL ready corners. And in particular, if you take someone like Surtain, he's coming from Alabama. So he knows how to run an NFL style defense. He can match man. He can play mirror match. So he's somebody that a cornerback needy team can say, this kid already understands most NFL concepts because he's coming from Saban's defense. And really, Gary, that over the top thing, I think will be the deciding factor as to which team says, all right, look, if we've got a strong set of safeties, experience, like veteran safeties, who know what they're doing, I don't see him going to Buffalo, but Buffalo's like, listen, we've got two of the best safeties in the league. We're not worried about over the top. We're worried about in the middle. The drop off from being NFL ready for the cornerbacks from Surtain to the next level, maybe Asante Samuel as well, is a pretty big drop off. So if you're a cornerback needy as an NFL team, you know that Surtain is likely absolutely your best bet this time around. So you need to grab him before somebody else. So I think that's why we're seeing him move up in mock drafts, is because he, like we talked about with being thin, right? There just aren't a ton of great cornerbacks. And if you can grab an NFL ready one in the first round, then you should. The other thing I want to say about that is that, particularly when it comes to defensive backs are always volatile. And a lot of that has to do with how NFL defenses work, because every time you get a new defensive coordinator, one of the first places they start toying with is the secondary, particularly in the pass happy NFL nowadays, right? So, and we're seeing a lot more rotation back there, mixing and matching slot guys, so a cornerback might only come on the field for a tight end in the slot, whereas somebody else is going to come on the field for a running back in a slot. So it becomes it's a highly volatile position. One thing I've checked out just in doing some research is for Dynasty IDP, a defensive back that is drafted within the first 50 picks has a strong chance of being the outlier, the type of defensive back who you can keep on your roster from year to year to year. If they don't get him, and really it's the first round, right? But we bleed into that second round because there have been some great players drafted high in the second round. But once you get past that, I'm not spending a dime, and I'm not spending a single draft pick on a defensive back that gets drafted after position 50, because the chances of them making it on the NFL field for enough snaps over the course of the next 5 years is terribly low. So I would rather take a shot at a linebacker who might eventually get a 3-down spot, etc. So just keep that in mind this year. Surtain from the IDP perspective could be a good grab if he does go fairly highly. Almost, the rest of these defensive backs, I'm not feeling good about for long term for Dynasty.
All right, guys. Roxanne is telling me I'm going to ask Ben, where's the lobby on on StreamYard? Because she said that she accepted the link. She's in lobby. I figured she would be down here at the bottom when she was ready, right?
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with the host side of the StreamYard. So I know that you should be able to see her or pull her into, like, she's like in the backstage, I think, or something like that. I'm honestly not super familiar with it though.
Yeah, I'm looking around here. I would have suspected that she would pop up down here with the rest of us, and I had to add her, but I am not seeing her. She said she's going to try it again. So, folks, Roxanne's trying, and I'm trying. And I apologize there, Justin. I'm sure everybody got what you was talking about. I apologize. I was distracted. I don't necessarily like doing that.
Well, yeah, I'd just be preaching to the choir if I was talking to you, Gary. So
yeah.
You're the last person that needs to listen to me prattle on about defensive backs.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate it. Your flattery will get you everywhere, dude. So, same thing. This is how it
so that was like one thing that I noticed too, is just like doing my first really startup IDP this off season, is that positional value doesn't seem like cornerbacks in particular hold nearly as much weight. So if you're looking at if you need a defensive back, there's probably only one safety, is the kid from TCU going in maybe the first round this draft. So I think that even if Surtain ends up as the first defensive player total in the NFL draft, I would still probably look to value the kid from TCU even higher in as far as an IDP standpoint goes, just because of positional value, corner versus safety. So if I'm drafting a dynasty rookie draft, the draft capital in that standpoint doesn't matter as much to me. If they're both first rounders, I'm still looking at the safety.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Ben. Absolutely. And really after those two, it's with veteran players, the general consensus in IDP, and it holds up almost every single year, is wait as long as possible on defensive back, because you will pick up your starting defensive back who will end up in the top 10. You're going to pick him up in week 3 right off the waiver wire, because you're just like, wait, I didn't even realize that kid was starting, and now he had 12 tackles and an interception. And then it happens every year. The turnover from the top 20 the top 20 DBs from year to year is insane. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 that will stay in the top 20. The rest of them rotate out, and it's
interesting.
So you can almost treat your defensive backs, unless you have like a if you have like a John Johnson or somebody like that. Obviously, Jamal Adams would be a great example of like that kind of, almost like the Aaron Donald version of like, yes, you want to hang on to this guy at all costs just because of his elite value compared to everyone else. But outside of that, man, it is just it's an absolute rotating wheel, and you almost want to view defensive backs similar to kickers. You just look,
okay,
I'll ride this guy until he starts missing chip shots, and then I'll kick him to the curb and pick up somebody else and keep rolling. And again, that creates this kind of separation where it makes the Jamal Adams even more valuable. But if you decide not to go that, it's like a tight end kind of thing. If you want to grab the Travis Kelce's, etc., you can spend that draft. You can spend that draft position early. If you don't do that, I mean, wait as long as you can, because you can be racking up on the next the next Patrick Mahomes, who the year he blew up, he was like a 7th or 8th round pick.
Yeah.
And, so you could spend more money and definitely spend more draft capital on, shots for the next great wide receiver or quarterback, whatever, and wait to the very end for defensive backs. And everything I just said gets magnified when it comes to rookies. It's even more volatile.
Cool. I think that's a really important point, like especially when it comes to approaching like your rookie drafts from an IDP standpoint, and just because the NFL values these guys doesn't mean you necessarily should.
Right. Exactly. So what are some other things you wanted to hit, Ben? Anything particular that we haven't covered yet?
So it's just as far as from like a starting, like, getting my feet wet in IDP. Some of the things like that we looked at was just kind of like the positional value, right? And like how you value things. And I think we kind of hit on that quite a bit. I think that Gary kind of pulled up Shane's comment there for a minute. And I think that's honestly a question I hadn't even thought of. But as far as like when you're in a dynasty in particular, like when you're trading IDPs, like I think that there's a lot of us out there that understand, okay, like I can trade, like the value of this guy versus that guy, like I get it, but like IDPs, I haven't even tried to make any trades in this league yet because I don't know like where to even look at. So like I don't know. Is there like a explain it to me like I'm 5 kind of a like trade value like that you have, Justin?
Well, one of the things that is tricky for IDP is that there's several different kinds of league setups, and so we're always preaching know your scoring and know your league, and this is what I mean by that. You can be in a IDP league that starts 3 IDPs, maybe 1 linebacker, 1 defensive back, 1 defensive lineman. You can even be one that it's just a general IDP position. Or you can be in one that starts 11 starters. I mean, really for IDP, it really does run the gamut. And that greatly affects this. I would say when in doubt, you'd want to spend, finding a 3-down linebacker, finding the next Luke Kuechly or Bobby Wagner, somebody like that who you can, plug into your lineup for the next 5 to 10 years, that to me, that has, like a Fred Warner, for example, right? That's the type of player that is going to fit into any type of league. And he's also young enough and all that he's got potential to be a value in a dynasty league for a long time. So I'm looking at like younger linebackers that have a 3-down role. I'm also looking, Gary mentioned this a little bit earlier, but any of those like elite defensive linemen like Joey Bosa or Myles Garrett or whatever, because of their positional value, those are the type of players that you either want to trade for, or what often happens. What I see when people will send trade offers, like, hey, will you evaluate this? I'll see like third string wide receiver, backup quarterback, and Myles Garrett for Devontae Adams or something. I'm like, look,
yeah.
For the love of God, don't do that. Like somebody's trying to fleece you. So,
Yeah.
To me, when it comes to defensive linemen, you want to only value those really elite players, because there's so much, they're a dime a dozen once you get past that. And it's easy to replace that player on the waiver wire. It's a lot easier than it might seem. For linebacker, that's a deeper one. And so I want to spend more. I want to take more shots at a 3-down linebacker. I want to hang on to my elite, my Jamal Adams as my elite defensive backs and my elite defensive linemen. And I'm not going to overvalue a DL2 or a DB2 at all because they're so volatile. So I'm going to be deeper. My dynasty leagues have more arrows or darts thrown at linebackers than anything else, because I know that they hold, in general, they hold the most value.
So we kind of talked about that last night a little bit, and it's just like, if I'm looking at it from a I don't know, from like an offensive versus defensive standpoint, like kind of like trying to compare, like linebacker to me seems like a little bit more like the wide receiver, where like they're going to hold, like you said, they're going to hold that value until they're like, probably 8+ years in the league.
Yes.
And they can hit a little bit earlier too, it seems like, versus some of these other positions. So like where you said like defensive backs, maybe comparable to like a tight end, where you might have to hold that guy for 3 to 5 years before all of a sudden now he's an elite stud. Like some of these guys take that time to develop. So I guess like the true, I guess, question I would have from a trade value standpoint is like, if you were to take like, let's say like an RB1, RB2 type, or wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 versus an LB1, like do you compare that as like scoring matters, but like would you make a trade like that involving those kind of like values?
Generally I wouldn't, and some of that has to do with IDP is really where you can get a jump on a league. Like IDP is not as well researched. I'm astounded at how many people play in IDP leagues who are brilliant offensive players, just because who has the time to go digging around for the next John Johnson you can pluck out, who just showed up kind of out of nowhere. So in general, I don't like to trade IDP IDP 1 for offensive player 1, if you will. And the exception to that does, as you were saying, does involve scoring. In general, most leagues that are prominent offensive leagues that has a handful of IDP leagues, most of the time the scoring doesn't add up. And a great exercise for anyone out there who's trying to figure out how valuable their IDPs really are is go to your top 100 in scoring last year in your league. If you don't see some of these studs showing up in the top 20, then that means that should tell you that's an easy way to do for your league. Go look. If you see Aaron Donald is scoring similar to Devontae Adams, then that is the league that you would consider trading a 1 to a 1. But usually what will happen is if you look carefully at your top 100 or top 200, it'll be obvious. You'll start scrolling and be like, oh my God, like not even my LB1 showed up in the top 80. All right, well, I'm definitely not trading, one of my wide receivers for somebody else's LB1, because they're not going to do me any good. So more often than not, elite wide receivers and running backs are going to hold more value than an elite linebacker. But use that top 100 scoring over your last couple of years in your league as your barometer as to whether or not that's worth it.
So one thing that really helped me, like getting my start into IDP with this draft that I did, and I can't speak for other platforms, we used Sleeper.
Yeah.
And Sleeper had a really awesome tool like that I didn't know about until I started this draft. But if you go to, I think it's called Leaders in Sleeper, and you can click on Leaders, and then you can actually go back like several years of players' value based off of your individual league scoring type. And I used that like crazy during my startup draft, because the way that I actually sorted it was based off of like, I looked at like the last like probably 2 years worth of data, and I actually went by their average scoring. So I had a look and saw like, okay, like elite linebackers in this league were putting up like 30-ish points, and like trying to see like what the drop off was between like, top 1 to 2 versus, linebacker 10, and like, and comparing that then to the value of what the receivers and the running backs were scoring. So that helped me a lot, trying to figure out like, okay, like, do I target a linebacker yet? Or do I say, okay, like these running backs are still on the board. They're averaging like, RB 15 is averaging like, let's say 12 to 13 points a game, versus like 4 rounds from now, I can still grab a linebacker that's averaging that. So like just using that and like using those resources that are available to you in some of these platforms, like Sleeper in particular, I think helped me out a ton, because I was able to say, okay, you know what? Like there's a bunch of linebackers between like LB 20 and LB 50 that all probably score between like a couple of points of each other on average. So like I can wait and just pick up a bunch of these guys in like the double-digit rounds.
Yep.
Dude, you sound like an IDP veteran. That's all. That's all stellar advice.
Yeah, I think
I
think he's tricking us, man.
Remind me to get into any leagues with Ben.
All right, so as you can see, I exited, and Ben, I told you I'd leave you in good hands with Justin. Justin's he's
we're all good.
One of the best out here. So I apologize, folks. I stepped off, but
man.
we're not able to get Roxanne on here. I apologize. She is listening to the show. Hi, Roxanne. Sorry about that. I can't figure it out. It's no lobby. I did want to mention that we did have a comment from, Shane. I believe we have a question coming up that he might be waiting on too, that I want to make sure that we answered. It was from last night's show, Ben. I don't know how much time you have left, but I just want to mention to him, to FF Shane, is get a hold of me and a private DM, and I'll get you an article about finding IDP trades. I got a couple different articles, cornerstones on that, and I'll make sure you get one.
We covered it a little bit too while you were off. So I actually brought up Shane's comment, so we're all good. We covered it.
Oh, well, yeah, late to the party. Well, it's sweet. Okay. You can still hit me up if you want. I'll get you that article. If not, I'm sure you was well taken care of. So I completely missed out on that last little bit. I'm confident that you kept them entertained. Ben, do you still have some time, or how you doing?
Probably only got about 5 more minutes. Unfortunately, I do have to jump into work a little bit. So I do have kind of one more question of my own, just because it's something that came up last night that I didn't think about. And I know like we've talked a lot about like what happened. Obviously, last season was just weird in general. Like we had opt-outs and things like that. And I feel like there's a few big name guys from an IDP standpoint that missed most or all of last offseason. And I'm curious like where you guys are going to value them moving forward. Like younger guy, Devin Bush, obviously missed last season. I think it was because of injury. But obviously now they've lost Bud Dupree. So I'm kind of curious where you see him at moving forward. And then a couple of like kind of older guys like Donta Hightower, Mosley, who both opted out. And then I know Anthony Barr, who missed last season as well. All guys that I feel like are huge names. Some have been elite in the past. Some have potential to be elite now. Kind of curious where you see them moving forward.
Well, Gary and I share a lot of the same thoughts on players like Donta Hightower and even Devin Bush, which is that one of the things that and Gary, I'm going to have you take this, but one of the things that happens is sometimes you'll get a really good NFL player who has a name that everyone knows and whatever that the analysts will talk about on the broadcast. But when you really look at their IDP production, because of how they're used on their defense, it doesn't really add up. So Hightower is a phenomenal player in New England in that position. He's a LB3, maybe LB2. He's not. He doesn't. His role isn't to stand in the middle of the field and soak up a ton of tackles. Right. Bush is somebody that has really perplexed both Gary and myself. I mean, he should be this 3-down inside linebacker, so
Yeah.
pushing 100 to 150 tackles, and he's just never done it. And some of it, I'm sure, is the defensive scheme. Pittsburgh scheme has changed quite a bit, but both of those guys are guys that might be hot names because they're coming back from opt-out, but if you really look back at what they were doing before, that's the type of player that I think will be overvalued because of their name and because, oh, well, look, here's a veteran with fresh legs coming back in.
Yeah.
That are players I think that likely might be overdrafted just because of what they were doing before. Gary, what are your thoughts on some of these opt-out players coming back, in particular, some of the ones that Ben mentioned?
CJ Mosley, I don't trust. Hurt, out of the league for the last 2 years. COVID. I'm personally, unless he happens to fall in the late second or something crazy, second wave of linebackers coming off. I actually favor. For some reason, I'm on the Gerard Davis boat right now.
Yeah.
So, me too, actually. I think he's undervalued. Absolutely.
Right.
We talked about him last night too, and I think that signing went really under the radar this offseason.
Me too. That is one of my biggest sleepers. Yeah.
But if we noticed on that signing, not only was it, I think, for $7 million, but it was one of the first signings.
Yes.
Somebody grabbed him quick. Right.
Right. When it comes to Anthony Barr is a phenomenal player in the NFL. Same thing as Hightower in New England, but unfortunately, these are called the catch-22 players. They don't, Barr. He plays the strong side linebacker in that formation, and it just doesn't produce. It's a notorious thing. He has a role that just doesn't normally put him in high production for IDP. So with Hightower, same thing. Especially with New England, because Belichick runs a really weird multiple different ways to do things type of defense, and it just leaves Hightower out. We haven't had a inside linebacker amount to crap, and for them, I don't know, since Mayo? What's his name? Mayo?
Yeah, Gerard Mayo. He's a coach now. He's the defensive coordinator, I think.
Right. So that was the last inside linebacker that ever accounted for anything out of it. That's 7-8 years ago or whatever it was. So as in Devin Bush, man, I love the kid. I didn't like how they used him his first year in his rookie season. He went on the field all the time. I was really curious why he was being pulled like he was, and then he turned around and he started out last year, one good game, and he kind of fell off. Then he got hurt. What is more alarming is what Justin brought up is that position should really be producing 140, 150 tackles, combined tackles, at least the opportunity to. So when Bush went down, we seen Spielin and Williamson come in and have those types of games that if they had been in there for the entire season, they might have gotten that. But Bush is not consistent. So whatever reason, whatever's happening with him, he's sliding down my board real quick. I see him still in a lot of top 10s right now, a lot of top 15s. And granted, maybe I'm not cutting the kid a break. I don't know about you, Justin, but he just something's there. He's not showing it in a position that should really produce, so he's sliding down.
Yeah. This is one of these players, and we can think of many on the offensive side of the ball as well, where it's like I think they will definitely be overvalued. Devin Bush is likely to be overvalued. But what's funny is that if he's not overvalued in your league, if he starts to slip, then all of a sudden he becomes this like, well, hang on, because if he can turn it around, he could, he still has plenty of time to turn it around. Obviously, his rookie year, as Gary mentioned, Mike Tomlin did not trust him with a 3-down role. We expected him to jump in and be the new Ryan Shazier, and he wasn't. But he's obviously talented, all that. But he was playing like 60-70% of the snaps, and we were expecting 100%. Last year, like you said, started off great, and then he slipped back into that where he wasn't on the field all the time role. But obviously, they didn't have a training camp last year either. It was this kid's second year. Now he's hurt. if I'm not taking him within the top 10 or 15 linebackers. But if he slips into linebacker 20, linebacker 30 role, sort of, which I doubt he will, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually now, it's going to flip where all of a sudden he's going to be a sleeper. I doubt that will happen, but that's exactly the type of player that if he does slip in your league, watch. If you can get him for your second or third linebacker, then you're going to be happy. He's going to be a linebacker 2, a linebacker 3. So you're either going to be happy that, I'd rather take him than a bunch of other linebacker 2s, because at least he does have the potential to, like, hey man, it's clicked for him. Now he is an every down role, and now you're getting 145 tackles from a guy who is your LB2.
Yeah, I think overall with the injury and what we're talking about, I think he still holds his dynasty value a little bit better than he does a redraft value for this year.
I'd agree with that.
Just coming off the injury like that. So I think we covered. So Hightower and Barr, they just happen to be those guys, man. They're not in a system that allows production for IDP. They're better in any NFL player than they are, and we have a few of those. There's a lot of studs playing positions that just doesn't produce. We've covered Bush. Was there a fourth one?
Mosley was the only other one. And we talked about him and how you'd almost rather have Jared Davis.
I just want to make sure we covered it all for you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's just like a thought that I had last night that we didn't get to, because it was just like there's enough of these guys, especially coming off the COVID season and things like that, that are just kind of curious where their value is going to be. And I know, at least in my draft, I saw Hightower and I added him to my queue, and I was like, oh yeah, like that guy's a stud. And then I started looking at his scoring, and he's like 30 now, and some of these things. So
yeah, it's unfortunate with the Patriots. It's just teams in the last couple of years. Well, Patriots has been like that forever. They just don't offer a lot of IDP high productive guys. They have some solid guys, and everybody thinks, that there's. Well, I mean, I made a good call last year. I think pat myself on the back with Phillips joining in. I mean, when you've got a safety that's leading your team in combined tackles, that's just and it's year in and year out. They've never just really offered anything. It's kind of like the Lions. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
He's a Lions fan there, Justin. So,
hey,
it is what it is.
Yeah. But hopefully that's going to turn around for you.
That's what I was about to say. Hopefully, change of scenery will do some good there, and I think it will.
Well, I'm excited. Just like if you're looking at IDPs, I mean, I think there are some sleepers on the Lions team. Just like now that they finally got a whole new, entirely new coaching staff and everything, I think that a lot of philosophies are going to change there. Aaron Glenn's the defensive coordinator there now. So, and then they brought over not to talk too much about my team, but then they brought over the secondary coach from LA. So if you are looking at some of these guys that could potentially be values, I look at the Lions, especially their secondary. Tracy Walker's a guy that's produced and obviously still young. Now that they've got Aaron Glenn and I can't remember, Aubrey something from the defensive back coach from the Rams. So, I mean, I look at even just particular Tracy Walker and even Okuda as a cornerback. I mean, you saw what obviously they were able to do, and you got a guy that has experience with Jalen Ramsey. So I'm excited just from a fan standpoint, but honestly, just from a sleeper standpoint. Okuda was third overall pick last year, so just to see what he can become now with those guys coaching him up.
I'm hoping they can give Will Harris another shot at the strong safety or get him on there in that defensive area. I thought Will Harris would have a lot better chance of Patricia, man. What is it with those people? I don't get it. He took a team that was struggling and just come in and put the gas and ran them straight into the ground as hard as he could. It was like, wow, really? Too smart for his own good or something. I have no idea. Hey, look, we've already ran into an hour, and I have 3 questions from last night's show with the 14 with you guys, with you and Jay. And I want to make sure, because I mentioned to him on Twitter that we would cover those just in general, because I know we missed them last night, and they were just some IDP questions. You want to hang out for those, and then we'll wrap it up? Real quick.
Do you mind if I probably have to go? No. Do you mind answering them with me off the air? Unfortunately.
Hey, man, life happens. I appreciate you hanging out all this time, Ben. So hey, folks, make sure you go check out and follow Ben. Go through his cohort, Jay. Do you know Jay's handle?
His handle is @JARST, @JAYARSHT.
And catch both these guys at the 14P Pod, and make sure you go subscribe and check them out on YouTube too. So start with Ben, follow that bio, lead your way to where you got to go. So
you can find all of our links on my page. So no, I appreciate you letting me jump on with you this morning, and obviously being on my show last night, Gary.
Hey,
and Justin, pleasure meeting you, man.
Nice meeting you too, man.
Anytime you'd like to come back on, we'll get you scheduled, man.
All right, sounds good. I'll talk to you guys.
All right, see you, man.
You have a good one. All right, Justin. So you got a few more minutes, buddy. I know slightly cover a couple of things real quick because I promised these guys.
I got about 5 more minutes, but I'm sure we can do these rapid fire. So let's hit them.
Yep. We're going to rapid fire and we're going to get out of here. So the first question is, how do you evaluate the different positions? I'm talking about rookies, specific traits. Short and sweet.
Well, for me, for defensive linemen, I'm looking for I need to see an array of pass rush moves. I think that's one of the things that separates the wheat from the chaff. Is some college players succeed because they've got one really good pass rush move, but in the NFL, these NFL offensive linemen have seen it all. So you're going to need 3 or 4 pass rush moves. I'm looking for that. I'm also looking for position versatility because so many defensive lines move up and down nowadays. Like, as a defensive lineman coming into the NFL, you'll need to be able to play outside and inside. So these are things that are going to keep a defensive lineman on the field enough to be valuable. For linebackers, for me, it's a couple of things. It's shedding tackles. There'll be we've seen rookie linebackers get swallowed up because in college they had a great defensive line and they had room to run around and go chase. And then we get to the NFL, they start seeing these offensive linemen in their grill on the second level. And
right.
So shedding blocks and also lateral, side to sideline speed is a big thing, particularly with so much outside zone getting run. And then finally, obviously, coverage. Being able to cover a tight end or a running back. If you've got coverage skills as a linebacker. So if you're going to take some shots at some sleepers, look for linebackers that have coverage skills. Look for defensive linemen who may not have it fully developed, but they at least have a wide array of pass rush moves, and also they're versatile. And it kind of, we talked about it with Patrick Surtain for cornerbacks and defensive backs because there's so much a mix of zone and man now, and so much moving of schemes. You're looking for a versatile player that can play in man, play in zone, can play 2 deep or 1 high safeties. Positional versatility is what wins the day in the NFL this year. It's going to keep a player on the field more often than not.
Yep. And I can't follow that up, folks. You heard him. Exactly the right process to take care of it. I like a little bit of aggressiveness.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that aggressiveness look. But, when you get up to NFL and everybody's a stud, the whole playing field's different. That's why I consider rookies a luxury. The next one is Jordan Whitehead going to take the next step and become an elite IDP safety? My opinion, not as long as he's playing the free safety position with the Buccaneers. I think he's probably peaked. It's that kind of demographic. I think they play, what's that called? It's not the Tampa 2, is it?
No, not anymore. Well, they play a little bit of that, but not fully.
Right. But he's probably peaked. He's just going to be one of those guys, upper DB2 possibility, a guy if the matchup's right. Of course, that's with a lot of the players. But I think you've seen Jordan Whitehead peak. What do you think?
I think the same thing. I think the main issue is that with Jordan Evans never being healthy, there was a chance that Whitehead could move into that strong safety position and be that player. But now they've got Antoine Winfield and he's killing it. So I think the presence of Winfield is, and also Whitehead plays a pretty good free safety. So why would they move him out of that position? So it's almost like
he's better than Justin Evans was.
Yeah, exactly. So he's for IDP purposes, he's basically too good as their deep safety for them to move him up in the box, and particularly when they have Winfield.
Right. All righty, and then one more. Which linebackers and DBs are most likely to be sleepers for the fantasy NFL 2021? Give me one linebacker or one defensive back that you think could possibly be a sleeper.
I'll go with some rookies since it's been kind of a little bit of a rookie conversation. Justin Hilliard, the linebacker out of Ohio State. Ohio State has a ton of great players, and Hilliard wasn't a full-time player, but he's got the chops to be. He has NFL qualities. He's also solid in coverage, etc. Hilliard could be the kind of guy that somehow by the end of training camp replaces some veteran and has a three down role that nobody saw coming. And then for edge rushers, I think Carlos Basham is a guy that people aren't talking enough about. The kid from Wake Forest. I think he's going to be somebody who might get drafted a little bit later, who could end up working his way into a larger role. That's somebody that so I'd look for Basham late in the rookie draft, and I'd look for Hilliard. Those are two good dart throws.
Nice. And I'm just gonna. You're better off listening to Justin right now about the rookies for sure. So I'm going to. What's that? Yeah, I'll go with Gerard Davis. I'm going to stick with Gerard Davis. I'm in that boat. I've already spoke about it a few times, and I'm going to stick in there at the inside linebacker position. I really like that second-year kid from Miami, Brandon Jones, safety.
Oh yeah, Brandon Jones. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Brandon Jones coming up. I actually think that he could probably send Eric Rowe to the bench this year. And then, believe it or not, I'm going to go with a good old Buckeye to Quan Lewis for the Colts. I'm thinking that with Autry gone and him in his final year of his thing, he's going to get a lot more opportunities. And I really think that he's got the potential to stand up and be something. Yeah. So wrapping that up, Justin, if you have anything else to add, man.
It was a pleasure to be on here. It was great talking with Ben. It was fun to get back on here.
Yeah, cool. And I think we might have you again next Friday.
I think so. Yeah, I gotta look. I'm traveling, but I should be able to grab a few minutes in the hotel room and hook this up.
Right. So sweet. Well, you're going to see a lot of Justin. If I have anything to do with it, Justin's going to be on here at least once a week. If we're lucky, maybe more, because he really brings it to the table. So I really appreciate everybody hanging this long with us, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. See you.